Welcome to Inside the Broncos, Football in the West, the University of Connecticut edition. I'm Larry Pulowski, and joining me every week is Jeff Caves from KTIK 93.1 The Ticket, Cumulus Radio. Jeff, all week long, I know you've had to deal with the Ray Rice issue, but has there been any Boise State talk in between the edges of that?
It's been difficult. You know, there's been some talk about the corners and getting some guys involved in that on that side of the football. But, you know, it really hasn't, because Coach Harsin shut the players down on Wednesday from interviews because of the shortened week. They got on the plane on Thursday. They got in there early. So it's been a different week for sure.
Well, I'm one of those curmudgeons that doesn't like 8:15 start games, so I was not at the game this week. But, Jeff, let's talk a little bit about the atmosphere at the stadium and what must have been one heck of a late walk-up and some great sales the day of the game.
Yeah, you know, I think at the end of the day, they sold about 7,000 tickets, Poe, in 4 days, which is an unbelievable rally. The weather really cooperated. I think the reverse psychology of being up front with everybody saying we don't even have 28,000 seats out on Tuesday worked, because everybody covered that, and I think fans got the message there were still seats available.
Well, what was the scuttlebutt on the metal detector thing? I mean, did you see that going in? I know your seats are up in the skybox. There was a report that some of them weren't even turned on. I mean, it was kind of a weird setup, but weird to see metal detectors at Albertson Stadium now.
Yeah, and the best comparison I can give you is having gone to the Super Bowl a few times. It was very Super Bowl-esque.
Okay.
And it looks like how the Super Bowl set up, where you have to go through all this clearance. And yes, the South Tower of the Stickle Sky Center was actually with a smaller line than I've ever experienced it. So it was even easier to get into there than it ever had been. I don't know why. And I did notice at other places, I'd heard reports that at some point they just let people through the gate so they weren't late to get in. So it was a trial and error process, but that's the time we live in, I guess.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And I was watching the game on ESPN2, and they missed the kickoff. So, that was very appropriate. They had an overrun in their game beforehand. You know how that works.
Yeah, it delayed the game 10 minutes.
You're always at the mercy of the ESPN guys. So, hey, if you want to win tickets to the next home game, which would be the Louisiana game on the 20th of September, go to our website and sign up right now. It's simple. You need your name, your address, your phone number, and you could win 4 end-zone tickets to the next Boise State game versus Louisiana. We'll be back with more Inside the Broncos Football in the West. We'll break down that Colorado State game. This is brought to you by Even Green Technology, your Treasure Valley solar expert.
Football in the West is brought to you by Even Green Technology, the Treasure Valley Solar Authority, and Steve's Hometown Ford and Steve's Hometown Toyota, 100% committed to your satisfaction. Also by Western Heating and Cooling, turn to the experts, and Leisure Time Spas and Hearth Products. Come see us at Leisure Time. You'll be glad you did.
Welcome back to Inside the Broncos Football in the West. Jeff and I now are going to turn our attention back in time a little bit to the Colorado State game.
Yeah.
And what turned out to be, and I really like the blue on blue unis. I'm sorry. I like that look. But it turned out to be a pretty big offensive explosion, at least for 3.5 quarters. The offense really was churning, rocking up some yards, almost 700 yards in total offense.
Yeah, one of the best performances ever. I mean, that's one of the best offensive performances yardage-wise in the history of the school. As we all know from listening, it's about points, though.
Yeah.
And at least the system is efficient enough. And I know Jay Ajayi's workload is heavy, as is Matt Miller's, as is SWR, as is Grant Hedrick's, but that's this team. There are no other options that I could see. I was looking at Ajayi's stats, and he's got to get some blowouts because we need to get him out of the game. Nobody's run the ball more in the country than Jay Ajayi, and I just think that's an accident waiting to happen at times.
Well, and sooner or later the guy's going to get a ding, he's going to get banged up, or God forbid he really gets hurt, because they haven't really tested anybody behind him. And I don't know what it's going to take, and you're right, it must be the blowout. Until they get ahead by 3 or 4 touchdowns, that kid's going to stay in the game. But it really scares me to watch this offense perform with the limited amount of people that touch the ball. Although last week, 7 receivers got their hands on the ball, although 2 of them were running backs. 5 receivers touched the ball. Rowe was, again, the only tight end. But your thoughts on the distribution factor?
Well, I think what you saw was the game slowed down.
Yeah.
So when a quarterback drops back and he doesn't have a 300-pound first-round NFL draft pick breathing down his back, he has a lot more time to see the field, hit numbers 2 and 3, doesn't panic. And then I also know that Grant took off a lot. And I think that affected Colorado State's pass rush as they had to stay in their lanes and make sure he didn't scoot by. So he had a lot more time to slow down and read for some better options.
Are you concerned at all about the amount of points, the number of sheer points that are being scored in the fourth quarter? Now, this defense, again, like it did against Ole Miss, it ran around like maniacs for 3 quarters, and then we come to the fourth quarter and there's a letdown. Now, maybe it was the midnight start time of that quarter. Maybe it was just the lateness of the game. Maybe it's just a flaw in the mentality of this defense. I don't know what it is, but what do you account for these slow fourth quarters?
Well, it's a lot of points they're giving up. I know that. We're talking a majority of their points are coming out of the fourth quarter, but 4 out of their 5 corners were out. Think about that.
Yeah,
4 out of their 5 top corners were out in the fourth quarter. And then I think anytime you exercise heavily and it's later at night and then you stop because the offense is gaining all these yards and you go back on the field, you're stiff, you don't have the same mojo, and you've got a big lead and you're playing a little bit more safety oriented, you're not letting guys get behind you, you're going to give up some plays. And you're okay because you're going to win the game. And I think that's part of it in the Colorado State game.
All right. Well, it's certainly going into any fourth quarter, you'd like to see a little bit more gusto out of them. But, hey, they got the job done. They ended up winning by 13. They covered the point spread if you're one of those Vegas guys. And everything came out good. Well, when we come back, we're going to break down the Mountain West Conference, talk a little bit about a couple of games there that we've highlighted that we think will interest you too. Welcome to Inside the Broncos, Football in the West, brought to you by Even Green Technologies, the Treasure Valley Solar Authority. Welcome back to Inside the Broncos, Football in the West. The Mountain West Conference this week has some marginal games, a lot of FCS opponents in the mix, not a lot of highlight games, but we do have 2 that we think have special interest to people, and Fresno State, Nebraska is number 1 on our list. Nebraska travels to Fresno. Now there's a shocker for you.
Right, that's the biggest news. It's great. It's great for the conference. It's great for Fresno.
They'll fill that place up for sure. We understand that. But Nebraska had a little trouble last week at home against a team that, well, you wouldn't think they'd have trouble.
Yeah, McNeese State was the opponent, and they had to pull it out with a big run. By the way, Nebraska fans bought up tickets to that game by buying Fresno State season tickets just for that game and then dumping the rest. Is how they got around it, and so they sold it out. It's quite a process. That's how they ravel. That's how they troll. But Fresno State's challenge, Poe, is they're not defending the pass well at all. One of the worst in the country, and unfortunately for Fresno State, Nebraska's not throwing the ball well.
Match
that's a decent matchup. I think the killer is that Fresno's just not playing well at quarterback, and I don't know what kind of offense they can generate, and can they stop the run? We're going to find out. This great test for Fresno's defense. If they come out of this with a great effort and kind of limit Nebraska, maybe not win to keep it close, maybe Fresno can change the corner, turn the corner, especially if their quarterback comes around.
Well, and which quarterback is it? I mean, they came out starting with a couple of quarterbacks. I think they've settled on one kind of as they go along.
The transfer from Connecticut.
The Connecticut kid. But, when you really look at the physicality of what Nebraska is going to bring to the table, they're still a Big Ten team.
Right.
They're big. They're physical. They're probably going to have a certain amount of speed. Just things that Fresno doesn't see every week. But look at Fresno's schedule. They have seen it every week.
Yes, they have.
They saw it against SC, and they saw it against Utah. So Utah not as physical as a lot of teams, but still a Pac-12 team that brings a lot to the table. And this is their 3rd big test in a row. who the heck's making the schedule up down there?
Well, that athletic director is leaving, so I know they need to pay some bills.
All right, the other big game, real quickly, Nevada, Arizona. Nevada with a big win last week against Pac-12 Washington State.
Right.
They get to test drive their Pac-12 wheels again.
Yeah, well, they beat, they came within 1 point of beating Arizona 2 years ago in the New Mexico Bowl. It was a crazy 49-48 game.
I remember that, yeah.
Yeah, and so that was a good test for the offense. Now the defense is going to be tested for Nevada. If they come out of this game with a win, because this is a young Arizona team. Now, Rich Rod and his zone read is unbelievable. Their run defense will be completely tested again. We're going to get a great read on Nevada, where they're already almost selling out the Boise State game. But I look at Nevada and think, man, is Arizona ready to stumble because they're so young? And does this put Nevada in the driver's seat for the Pick Six bowl game?
If they win it does.
It could, yeah.
It
Big game for them.
All right, when we come back, it's time to make some picks right here on Inside the Broncos, football in the West. Welcome back to Inside the Broncos, football in the West. Time now for the expert picks. We're going to have to bring in a couple of experts, but we're going to give you some picks anyway. Let's go to the leaderboard. This is pathetic. This is sad. This is, I don't know, there's no other bad words I can say.
We're just warming up. That's all it is.
We're just warming up.
Come
All
on,
right,
Bo.
let's get to our picks. We're going to go with Jeff's picks first. He's got one that's going to shock you and one that makes some sense.
Well, I just look at Nebraska's offensive line. I think they're struggling. I know their quarterback's going to struggle. Fresno's got a lot of momentum from the enthusiasm of their crowd. So I like them to cover. I don't think I like them to win, but I like them to keep fighting and cover in this game. So I'm going to go with the Dogs.
Yeah, the Cornhuskers aren't exactly an offensive juggernaut, so that's a good pick. All right, now here's a shocker to me. You're going to take the Vandals over the Western Michigan Broncos. So the Vandals over the Broncos this weekend.
Yeah, well, Western Michigan 1-11 last year. They're terrible. I like Linehan at quarterback. He's throwing it around well. The defense is a lot better. And they're just not very good. This is the first time I can say, go ahead and lay off 2.5 and take the Vandies.
All right, there's your poison. I got killed by Vatek in week 1. I'm going to go back and get on the other side of that bandwagon. They look like they've been playing pretty good. -11 over East Carolina. I think they can get the job done. It's at Vatek. I think they'll win by 2 touchdowns. My second pick, now this one, if Oregon covers this spread, then maybe you ought to jump on board with me. But maybe not. 43.5 points is what Wyoming
I go the other
is
way.
getting.
That's too many points.
I mean, that
Don't
is
slow
just
the
a
game
lot.
down. Paul, if nothing else, these guys are going to slow the game
Well,
down.
if they could slow Oregon down, then somebody better bottle that and take it to the bank. All right, let's get to Boise State. We're on the same side of this, Caves. You're going to take 14, give up the 14.
I'll give it up.
UConn.
Yeah.
Now, we took this spread earlier in the week. As the week's gone on, that point spread keeps continuing to rise. So a lot of money going down on Boise State right now.
Yeah, I think it'd be 28. I really do. There's no quarterback. They struggled against Stony Brook. Boise State should really roll in this game.
Yeah, Stony Brook, I found out, is in the state of New York. So if you were curious about that, that's where they're from. But I like it too. I just think they'll get the steamroller going. And the offense for UConn just really struggles. Defensively, they play okay. But we'll see if Boise State can get up early. And if they do, I think they'll roll. Okay, there's the picks of the week. Do with them as you may, but be very, very careful out there. We'll be back with the start of the UConn talk right after this on Inside the Broncos, football in the West. Well, we're back now to talk some Pac-12 football right here on Inside the Broncos, football in the West. UCLA at Texas this week. Texas, I don't know what to say about Texas right now. I mean, after what happened to them against BYU, that was embarrassing.
It is, and I think that's what the coach said. Coach Strong said the same thing. Very embarrassed. They got a new quarterback they got to break in Swoops, who's got a lot of talent, a lot of potential, but he's not seeing the field. He wants to tuck it and run. He's not ready for prime time. I definitely don't think he's ready for UCLA. One fortunate thing, they're not playing this game in Austin. They're moving the game to Cowboy Stadium, so it's not
Jerry's
neutral.
house.
It's
Cool.
it's not neutral, but they are going to play it in Arlington. So other than that, I just think that Swoops takes way too many sacks, and UCLA will really get after him, and I think the Bruins will roll here.
You know, and UCLA hasn't really exactly fired on all cylinders either, although they've played fairly well. They just haven't been, you know, the team that everybody thought they were going to be coming in. I mean, they were picked, in a lot of cases, from what I saw, to win the Pac-12 this year.
Oh, yeah, they're a Final Four team.
They just struggle a little bit to me, and, you know, that will come to see. If they go down to the big stage in Jerry's house, could be a different story. Speaking of struggling, how about Coach Pete and the Washington Huskies? They take on Illinois this week in Seattle, and it could be just some nerves of getting that program off the ground. It could be just the change in thought process, moving from you know, a non-Power 5 to a Power 5 conference. I don't know what it is, but Washington doesn't look very good.
No, they're struggling at times on both sides of the balls, alternating. You know, Hawaii was offense, and then, of course, Eastern Washington, it was defense. With Miles back at quarterback, though, I think they continue to roll. And they've got some tremendous
They did score points.
Yeah, they did score points against Eastern, and they got Thompson playing well at linebacker, Shelton, tremendous defensive lineman. And Illinois shouldn't pose that much of a threat. So I really think this quarterback lunt for Illinois can be baited into making mistakes. Washington, I think, rebounds real well and wins the game.
Well, as you look at the Big Ten this year, the Pac-12 has got some good wins. But the Big Ten, I'm sorry, right now it's the bad 10. They are not playing very good ball. Michigan got blown out. You saw Michigan State get blown out in the fourth quarter against Oregon last week. Illinois, Nebraska, Purdue, I mean, just take your pick of those middle ground teams that nobody really knows anything about. I just think that the Big Ten this year is a disaster.
Well, there's some people that think that's one reason the NCAA lightened the penalty on Penn State to put them back. They know that there's a lot of fans in the Midwest. They need to be relevant. Penn State's a team that you would think can make a run back to prominence, and they need them. And Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, you know, all teams that can threaten for that, and Nebraska. And right now, you look at their record against top teams in other conferences across the country, it's dismal. And this is not just this year. We're talking the last several years. The Big Ten's not gotten it done.
All right. Well, speaking of getting it done, we'll see if Coach Pete and his boys can get it done this week against the Illini from Illinois. Hey, if you'd like to win 4 end-zone tickets to the next Boise State home game against Louisiana, go to our website, 12ktrv.com, and sign up to win. They're waiting for you, but you can't win if you don't sign up. We'll be back with more Inside the Broncos Football in the West, brought to you by Even Green Technology. Welcome back to Inside the Broncos Football in the West, brought to you by Even Green Technologies, the Treasure Valley's solar authority. Well, you're not going to see much solar at 7 o'clock in the morning tomorrow when you're up starting your pregame shows. Unbelievable.
Oh, come on. Frank Lloyd Wright got up at 5 o'clock Mountain Time. Did you know that? Margaret Thatcher was up at 5 in the morning.
Well,
no problem for me.
Good for them. But
yeah, I won't sound great, but I'll be there on KBOI.
We're just radio and TV slugs. We like to sleep. It could be an interesting day in totality. We don't know a whole lot about UConn, but if you look at the stat sheet, it is just a disparity that would cry blowout.
It should,
blowout.
Sure.
So what's going to stop that from happening?
I don't know, because the quarterback situation is tough. Whitmer was replaced as a quarterback. That kid that replaced him is now not even able to play football anymore. Whitmer was going to quit the program. He didn't even want to come back to UConn, so that was going to change things completely. So here you have a guy that is back at quarterback. He really struggles with his decision making. If I'm them, I'm throwing short passes. I'm trying to run the football at all costs. I'm taking time off the clock. I'm praying that this 30% chance of rain turns into 100% chance of rain. And Boise State slips on some banana peels, because it really is a difficult thing. And one of the challenges they've got is that when they get into a 3rd and long, it's really difficult for them. So this game doesn't have many ways I can paint it that UConn should beat Boise State.
Well, let me throw out one thing here, and you mentioned it in one of our earlier segments, is the fact that Boise State has some issues at the cornerback position. They have defensive backs that are dinged up or going to be out totally, and that could present some opportunity for the Huskies also. Do you think that this Whitmer kid has the wherewithal to be able to work young cornerbacks like he might see?
Well, let's face it. The three of us, any of us, could just launch the ball. I swear to you, just take the ball and just launch it. You see one-on-one coverage, get them into a one-on-one coverage situation, just launch it and see what happens. I know they're going to do some of that. Darian Thompson may have to kick out there to corner. I think Dante Dion will be back on the field. I think that's good news. Hopefully Douglas will come off of his injury and be back. So I think it's enough to take care of UConn. But I would do that. I'd launch some rockets, no question.
All right. Well, let's. I looked at Hedricks last week and I saw some good things. You talked about his running ability. He made some nice throws. He ran a little bit, kind of flushed early a couple of times, but yet, if you see a lot of blue field, the kid's going to run. I really like what I saw out of Grant Hedrick last week, though. Your thoughts on his, the difference between him in week 1 and week 2?
Well, I think they unleashed the beast and said, go ahead. You got to take off. You got to do what you got to do, and we got to just go with it. And so 16 times Grant ran the football. I don't know that's ideal, but that's where they're at. And if you look at no touchdowns for anybody else but SWR and Miller and Jai and Hendrick. So all but 10 receptions coming from those guys. That's what I thought had to happen. They need Grant Hedrick to be active in the game. They need him to keep the ball in zone read. They need him to run and scramble for this offense to take it to the next level. And if he gets injured, I don't know that they'd have much chance if he didn't. It's just, I think it's worth the risk. The number one quality they look for in a quarterback is toughness, and so far he's proven it because he's taken shots 2 weeks in a row.
All right. Well, speaking of taking shots, we've talked about Jay Ajayi and the amount of time, the number of touches that he's spending during each game is kind of high, in my opinion, for a guy that is really the cornerstone of your offense, even more so than the cornerback, which is really odd to say about a running back because that doesn't happen very often. But with this guy's hands and the way he runs the ball, is there any way we're going to see Demas, Fields, Bertoli, anybody get some snaps back there to take a little bit of this pressure off? Where are those guys?
They're not good enough to play. It's not a mystery to me. I mean, why would you put somebody in that's not as good? I mean, it's plain as day to me. When you don't play when it counts, they don't trust you. They don't think you're ready. They can give you all the excuses in the world, but if they were ready and good enough, they'd be in the football game. The bottom line is nobody's as good as Jay Ajayi. There's too much of a drop-off, and unless there's a blowout, I think you're going to see him. Best case scenario, he runs for 100-plus in the first half. You don't see him in the second half.
All right. Well, it's just going to be interesting to see how long they can continue to go to the same people game after game after game. Sooner or later, a defensive coordinator is going to figure that out, and you've got to stop going to the 4-hole all the time. And I say 4-hole just pejoratively. You guys are going to have a nice pregame show for everybody. When does it start on 670 KBOI?
7 a.m. We'll be there at 7 a.m. I'll be there at 5 o'clock Mountain Time.
5 a.m. Mountain Time.
Well, I'm using 7 a.m. for Eastern Time. I'm trying to convince myself that this is a good idea. So hopefully I'll have my clothes on. Thank God it's radio. You won't see anything that's inappropriate. But tune in. Tune in. Make yourself better. Get up like Frank Lloyd Wright. Come on, you can do it.
All right. Well, you can get all that info on 670 KBOI. Thanks to our major sponsors, Steve's Hometown Ford and Steve's Hometown Toyota, and also to our friends at Even Green Technology, the Treasure Valley Solar Authority. For Jeff Caves, I'm Larry Pulowski. We'll see you next Friday on Inside the Broncos, Football in the West.
Inside the Broncos, Football in the West is brought to you by Even Green Technology, the Treasure Valley Solar Authority, and Steve's Hometown Ford and Steve's Hometown Toyota. 100% committed to your satisfaction. Also by Western Heating and Cooling, turn to the experts, and Leisure Time Spas and Hearth Products. Come see us at Leisure Time. You'll be glad you did.